You're listening to the Niners Bros, your home for post-game analysis, correcting media narratives, and keeping you up to date on all things San Francisco 49ers. What's up, guys? I'm Michael Ditchfield.
And I'm David Ditchfield, and we are the Niners Bros. On today's episode, we're going to be going over the 49ers' frustrating loss to the Chicago Bears and just do a full breakdown for you guys, talking about all the narratives coming into the game, the storylines coming out of training camp, Trey Lance's first official game as the starting quarterback for the 49ers, as well as just the weather, Debo's usage, new starters on the offensive line, all the new and exciting things that happened in this game that 49ers fans have been waiting to see. And let's get right into it. The first thing is, of course, you have Trey Lance and Justin Fields, a lot of comparisons. We'll talk about that more in depth, but before the game was even played, the weather was something that certainly affected the outcome. And
yeah, the narrative coming into the game, of course, was that this was going to somehow favor the 49ers because you figure it's a rain game. The Niners are a very physical football team. They're an excellent running team. And so that's what you're hearing a lot about is that, this is going to be a breeze for the 49ers. They're favored to beat the Bears anyway, but of course on a wet field, the edge goes to the Niners, right? Well, not so much. And that's really the thing. When you have these wet fields and these really unplayable conditions, it actually is an equalizer. There's this narrative that somehow that's really going to benefit one team or another, and really it doesn't. It just kind of levels the playing field. And one of the things that Shanahan's offense specifically is known for is that creativity of scheming guys open, giving them these windows, the pre-snap movement to where you get a guy who's just a little bit out of position. And when you've got these rain games with a terrible field and terrible turf, it's really difficult to execute those. And the timing and the precision, it's just not going to be there. And so I think it definitely did help keep the Bears in this game for a significant amount of time.
And it was frustrating listening to so many people on NFL Network or ESPN go on and on about, this is perfect for the 49ers. They love to run the football. Only I think the 49ers love to run the football on their terms. They love to run it in what would seemingly be passing situations. I don't think the Packers were counting on Debo getting the ball handed to him on 3rd and 7 in the NFC Championship game. But that's exactly why it works for the 49ers is we're zagging while everyone zigs. We're running out of shotgun on a play where we've got 4 wide receivers out there and they're putting out their nickel defense. They don't have their run-stopping unit. But in a game when you know that throwing the ball is not an option and every box is stuffed with 8-9 defenders, that advantage goes away in a hurry. And even this week, Kyle Shanahan was talking about outside zone and how important it is to his offense to get people out in space and outside zone and how it opens up the middle of the field for some of these trap plays and runs up the gut. When it's such a loaded box, no one's going to make it to the edge anyway, and it just clogs things up in the middle. So I know you were texting me before the game, and everyone was just going on and on in the networks that this is just what the 49ers want, and in Trey Lance's first start, isn't it going to be great that it's just going to be a run-the-ball game? That's what they want to do anyway, and you and I were rightfully so shaking our heads and saying this is not going to help us. It just broadcasts what we want to do anyway, and he's going to be facing a loaded box all day on a day when it's going to be really hard to throw.
Yeah, so jumping right into the game action, obviously the 49ers defense comes out very strong. First play of the game, it's just great to see Kinlaw busting through that line, breaking up the play. The drive ends with an Ebicom sack, so seeing that versatility on the defensive line, as advertised, as expected. Certainly the defensive line is one of the great strengths of the Niners, and we definitely saw that early in the game.
And some conversation in the offseason about trading Ebukam. Nice to see that he's still around and making an impact, and nice to see in the 49ers' first drive, they come out of the gate with those staple Shanahan end-arounds, and he seems to do that whether it's in the Super Bowl or throughout his time as the Niners coach. That seems to be a staple of his opening drives. I know you and I wish he would use some of those in the second half of games. He never seems to come back to them, but that got them off to a hot start. It seemed things were going really well. They even converted on a 3rd and short, which is something that they really struggled with anytime they brought Lance in last year. So you're starting to feel this momentum, and then Debo with the fumble.
Yeah, that was obviously a killer. The 49ers definitely had momentum coming into that moment there. Surprising throw on that deep crosser to Ayuk. You know, when you're seeing these guys before the game squeegeeing gallons of water off the field, you're hearing that the turf is 2 days old. You're really just hoping, like, dear God, please don't let somebody tear an ACL in the first week. And you're expecting it to be kind of like the game that we had against Washington, where that was truly just a mud bowl. So certainly a surprise to see Trey Lance even attempting a pass that deep. Perfect pass to Ayuk
Hitting
on
him in
that deep
stride,
crosser. Yeah, beautiful pass. Also kind of sets your mind at ease a little bit that maybe it is going to be possible to throw the ball a little bit in this game.
Sure. Well, you know, the Bears come right back and they start attempting to put together a drive. And there was a really strange moment where they had that tight end come down with the ball and he juggles and bobbles it. And we saw it right away, even live. And for some reason, the refs did not see it. Neither did the commentators. Neither did half of Twitter. Everyone was yelling at Kyle Shanahan for having the stupid idea to review that when clearly it was bobbled. Later on in that drive, Hufanga with the pick. So nice to see a safety, if you're a 49ers fan, catch the ball in the middle of the field. Sorry, Tart.
Yeah. And, it's funny. People question, why would you even challenge a 4-yard play? But when you look at what the Bears were doing on offense up to that point, or more importantly, not doing on offense, every play counts, and, very clearly not a catch. And you see George Kittle on the sidelines, 1 for 1 on those challenges, Kyle. So, George is always the cheerleader on the sidelines, even if he's too banged up to play.
Indeed. Well, the teams went back and forth for a little bit, and, we did see some of those penalties creep in, and we're going to talk a lot about that. The overall breakdown at the end of the game, San Francisco, 12 penalties for 99 yards, Chicago only 3 for 24, and we're just going to talk about that for a moment, just what those 3 penalties were for the Bears, because if you were a 49ers fan, this just drove you nuts. One of them was an offsides where Trey Lance, on a hard count, got 3 guys to jump off. It wasn't even a judgment call for the refs. Everyone knew what happened on that. There was another that was a delay of game where the Bears were purposely taking the 5-yard loss to run out some clock, and then they got a bizarre 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for drying the field. I've seen people dry their hands with a towel. I've never seen anyone take a towel out to actually try to dry the field. But
yeah, that was a new one, and kicked the Bears out of field goal range, so that was certainly appreciated there.
Yeah, but overall, only 3 penalties for the Bears, and none of them in the course of play, which is kind of hard to believe, especially as many flags as the 49ers were called for. And early on, when neither team had scored, Dre Greenlaw got us kind of started with that, with a really idiotic pursuit of Justin Fields on a sort of a scramble play where he really was not anywhere close to breaking anything open or getting a first down. He was just running for his life to the sideline, and Greenlaw picks up the personal foul, a recurring problem for the Niners.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. The Niners have been flagged, it feels like, more than any other team on those really weak late hits on the quarterback when the quarterback is sliding or basically ending the play. Moose on the broadcast was saying, you got to not give the refs an opportunity to throw that flag. And to an extent, that's true. But, man, that's a rough penalty. He barely touched him. I mean, he got his hand on him, but it wasn't that late. I mean, it wasn't crazy out of bounds. But, of course, as soon as you see that, it's going to be a flag. Like Niners fans, we all have PTSD. Anytime a guy touches a quarterback, whether it's legal or not, you're like, okay, well, here comes the linen, and it's another 15 yards.
I think a big question for us when we watch this over and over again is, why are they leaving their feet? Why are they launching at these guys? A lot of these quarterbacks that seem to get these penalties on these slides, they're, even if they were staying upright, they're not about to bowl you over. A lot of times it's these little guys like Kyler Murray, or in this case Justin Fields, who's not he's not Josh Allen, let's put it that way. So frustrating there. The teams kind of went back and forth doing nothing for the first 4 or 5 drives for each until, I guess, on the 4th drive, the 49ers finally break through a really beautiful, another in stride kind of throw from Lance to Ray. Just really gorgeous layered kind of throw. And then the touchdown to Debo. A lot of talk about Debo coming in and his usage.
Yeah, was he going to be in shape? Was he going to be ready?
Well, and did he even want to run the ball anymore? A lot of people, speculating, and everyone trying to get famous on Twitter for speculating as to why Debo wasn't happy with his contract negotiations, and some people saying it's because he didn't want to run the ball. Well, in this one, he ran the ball 8 times for 52 yards, including the opening score, that beautiful touchdown on a nice RPO.
And yeah, I think the contract incentive certainly put some of that to bed when you realize that that's a major part of how he's going to get paid. So kudos to the Niners for including that in the contract. And also, good on Debo being willing to be used in that way. It's pretty clear. I think he just wanted to get paid and get paid what he thought was fair.
Sure. And at the end of the day, if he's only getting 4 or 5 catches a game, but he's also getting 4 or 5 carries, I don't think there are a lot of wide receivers in the National Football League who are upset about getting close to 10 touches a game. But nice to see the 49ers, jump out and take a lead. Things got a little awkward after that. Mitchell went out with an injury. Ayuk was called on kind of a ticky-tack offensive pass interference. But Trey Lance picked up a big 13-yard third down on a scramble, which, again, it's so nice to see him converting on third down, and that's not something that Jimmy Garoppolo could have. Jimmy's good on third down, but not with his legs.
No, and there's going to be that inevitable comparison. Anytime Trey Lance is on the field and Jimmy Garoppolo is on the roster, that's, of course, the number one thing that everybody wants to talk about is Jimmy and Trey. And it's an awkward situation, but to Jimmy's credit, he certainly handled the situation, I think, as well as anybody could. And from all accounts, it seems like Trey Lance has been very mature about the situation and is really kind of ready to step into that role. In terms of what Trey Lance brings to the table, nobody is questioning that. It's just the consistency with the lack of reps he had in college, the lack of reps last year. So, a lot of that still remains to be seen. But, anytime Trey Lance does anything, now there's going to be people that are saying, you got to put Jimmy in, you got to put Jimmy in. And that's not really fair, but it is what it is, and it's certainly understandable.
I know I kind of rolled my eyes when they brought Jimmy back, but at the same time, you see why they did it. You feel pretty comfortable in a game like this that if Trey were to get hurt, you'd at least have someone who's been to 2 NFC Championship games, not another team in either conference who can say that. When the 49ers go to halftime up 7-0, it's good to be in the lead, but it
felt like it should have been 20-0 or even
did.
more. Definitely one of those games. And we've seen this with the Niners too, where they just come out and they dominate a game in time of possession, in yards, in really any kind of statistical category. But the score doesn't always reflect that. And a major theme of Kyle Shanahan's teams has been not finishing, right? Whether it's the epic meltdown, the 28-3 Super Bowl that he's sick of hearing about, the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, definitely a lot of history there of not putting teams away when they could have and should have, and again, really came back to bite them this week.
Well, the 49ers did go up 2 scores. I mean, coming right out of halftime, Lance hit that beautiful slot fade. Not exactly like Danny Gray because it was to Juwan Jennings. The throw was maybe a touch behind, and Jennings looked like he was running with boots on. He didn't quite make it to the end zone, and then a failure again to punch it in for 7. Red zone has been a little tricky. Not for the Niners last year. They were the number 1 team in the red zone, but for Lance sometimes there seem to be some struggles there. But still, you go up 10-0, and
feeling
at that
good,
point
right?
You're feeling pretty good. It's not likely that the Bears are going to keep going 3 and out or anything like that, but it also, with the weather potentially getting worse, you're feeling pretty good at that point. And then the penalties started coming back in. You had a really Dre Greenlaw had a bad, very, very bad, no good game. And
I think it's fair to say the entire linebacking crew did. You talk about the Niners front 7, that obviously starts up front with the D-line, but for anybody who is watching the games, the 49ers don't have a lot of household name linebackers, but, a lot of casual fans can't name 3 linebackers for any team. And, it's been viewed as a strength of the team, but in this particular case, more harm than good. You had the Bears. You've got a 10-point lead.
They run the ball twice for less than 5 yards, and they decide to run it up the middle again, basically giving up on the drive. You've got 49ers just gang tackling the guy, and Greenlaw comes in and decides he's going to try to go for the ball, but he misses the ball and gets the face mask. A couple plays later, Dante Pettis, who, raise your hand if you knew that Dante Pettis was going to have a touchdown in this game. Because of course. Broken play. Armstead again with poor contain. That's something that he's been criticized widely for by Grant Cohn and others. But to be fair, Justin Fields is pretty slippery, as we saw last year when the Bears played the Niners. But big long touchdown to Pettis, and you just want to scream.
Yeah, and that face mask was especially brutal. As you said, 3 or 4 guys already in on that tackle. That was maybe a half second away from being blown dead for forward progress. You come in there, you keep the drive alive. And now, after all of this time, it's 10-7, and you're not feeling quite so good about this game anymore. You're starting to realize that these penalties are stacking up. You're having that thought in the back of your mind. Is this another one of those games that the Niners are going to somehow find a way to blow? They dominated the game, and they just did not put up points when they needed to.
You would have loved to have seen the 49ers go on a drive right after that to answer. But instead, they get one, third down conversion to Jennings, and then they punt again. And that next drive, here come the penalties again. Mooney Ward with a defensive holding on Pettis. I will submit that I think if you are a grown man, it is difficult not to look like you are mugging Dante Pettis on a route, because that guy, I mean, his issues with strength and conditioning and just the way he plays, he is the most finesse wide receiver since A.J. Jenkins.
Ooh.
Just saying. But a penalty on him there, and then Al-Shaair with another brilliant linebacker personal foul, just gifting yardage to a team that, as Nick Bosa said, and it was a bit of a shot, but he said you can't give up 15-yard penalties to a team that can't move the ball, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and again, Shanahan in the post game is talking about how that was a point of emphasis for them all week, because they knew that Fields was going to be running, they knew that he was going to be sliding. And I'm not sure exactly what they coached them or how they coached them, but he said specifically that was a point of emphasis for them, was to avoid those late hits, and they got 2 of them, and just terrible.
Really nothing went right for the 49ers after that. Trey Lance had that interception, which was not the most egregious. He was a little late.
He stared him down a little bit, but again, these are the kinds of plays that you expect out of Trey Lance. He's a rookie, essentially, starting his first full season as a starter. So those are exactly the kind of throws that you are expecting Trey Lance to make, but you're just counting on the fact that the big plays that he makes, the drives that he extends with his legs, are going to compensate for those.
Yeah, and so on the next drive, or coming off of that interception, then you've got the Bears who get the benefit of a Javon Kinlaw holding, a defensive lineman holding. When was the last time you saw that?
Yeah, that's super rare, and again, it's just terrible. You never want to blame the officials for a loss. At the end of the day, you have to play better than your opponent. But man, a defensive lineman who's getting double teamed away from the ball gets called for holding. It's like, wow, that had nothing to do with the play, didn't affect it at all. And that's when it starts to feel like really almost conspiracy level, like what is going on with the flags in this game. Again, when you consider that the Bears were barely penalized at all, if you don't count Towelgate.
And at this point, the Bears take the lead. The 49ers have a turnover on downs, and the weather picks up, and it just
Terrible.
starts to you just the game completely unravels, and you just know that that it's over. And then the next thing you know, Justin Fields and his Bears teammates are following Nick Bosa's example from that game against the Washington football team, and they're sliding in the mud, celebrating,
zone, yeah.
and you're watching as a Niners fan, and you just
Stunned.
know this is going to be the highlight, this is going to be the still picture that goes viral, and you just feel sick, because now come the Trey Lance Justin Fields comparisons and the narrative that they passed on Justin Fields and he got the best of Lance, when really Lance outplayed him in this game.
He really did.
If you're looking at the box score, Lance goes 13 of 28 for 164. He does have the one pick. He only took 2 sacks, and he ran quite a bit. Certainly under 50% completion is not great, but I think the last 4 that I counted, or maybe 5 of those, were in monsoon weather, where either they were dropped or you're just not.
Yeah, the entire
passes.
field was a puddle at that point. On the TV broadcast, you can't even tell what side of the field they're on. They had to digitally impose the yardage marker on the field so that you could even see what was happening. You are not going to be able to complete passes in that weather. And again, that's where, maybe it was a conservative game plan or playing not to lose or whatever, but the field actually dried out surprisingly well in that second quarter going into the third quarter, and the Niners did not put up points when they needed to. That's the thing. In a game like this, when it's going to start raining at some point, you better be ahead in that game, because once it really starts coming down, nobody's scoring points at that point.
Sure. And back to the completion percentage analysis, certainly Lance didn't make it to 50 with those last few throws. Do you know who else didn't make it to 50?
Yeah.
It was Justin Fields, who was 8 of 17 for 120 yards. So for all those Bears players who said he was going to show the Niners, good for them that they came out with a win. But 50 of those 121 yards came on a fluke play to
Pettis. Yeah, 16 yards. That's how close the nearest defender was. So if you want to call that blown coverage, I'd say that that definitely qualifies there. So yeah, I mean, you take away 50 yards from his total. That's not an impressive stat line.
70 yards, yeah.
Yeah. So, you're seeing a lot of people saying that Fields definitely outplayed Lance. Anybody that's saying that, I'm just not sure if you actually watched the game. I'm not sure how you can make that argument. Did Trey Lance play phenomenal? No, and I don't think you're going to find many people saying that either. Obviously had that ugly interception, really low completion percentage, but he certainly had his moments. He made some good throws, some big-time throws. I think after week 1, he actually is leading the NFL in the big throw percentage category. Yeah, which, again, in a game like that, certainly that's impressive.
And as far as those who want to draw a conclusion after 1 week, I think if you wait 2 weeks, you will have a much better idea as you see Fields go up against Green Bay and Trey Lance get to take on a Seattle team. I think then we'll have a little bit more of an indication.
We're not being overly critical of Fields either. I mean, he's certainly got a ton of potential. And the strangest thing about this is that even though he started 10 games last year, a lot of people are saying, well, he needs some time. He's got all this potential. Let's see. And so the jury is still out on Fields after 10 games last year, and yet everybody already has their minds made up about Trey Lance. It's either, he's the next coming, or this guy doesn't have it. They need to put Jimmy in right away. And it's like there's nobody with reasonable takes. I get that it's a hot take and everybody wants to have an opinion on this issue, but come on, let's give the guy a chance. And again, the numbers don't lie. The eye test, doesn't lie. Like, Lance absolutely played better than Fields did in this game. I think, to be fair to Fields as well, the Bears did not seem to have any kind of game plan coming into this.
It was way more conservative, too. I know a lot of angst on 49ers Twitter about a conservative game plan from Kyle Shanahan, but Fields and a lot of the Bears starters played in preseason, certainly more than the 49ers, and he played well, and you saw a lot of play action and bootleg and get him out of the pocket, and because he did not seem to excel as a pocket passer last year. He held the ball as long as anyone, took a lot of games where he had 5, 6, 7 sacks, that kind of thing. So coming out, you were expecting maybe a little bit more of that bootleg play action, and they did not want to risk it. I think they knew that the 49ers had a loaded box, and if we were going to blitz, he was going to end up on his back. But because of that, it was not a creative looking game plan. Fields did not have a lot of, wow throws or anything like that.
Yeah, and the only ones that he did was on broken plays or where the pocket collapsed, and he's really, shifty. So there is obviously a difference between running quarterbacks and quarterbacks that can escape pressure in the pocket. Those two things are not the same thing, and I think everyone assumes that if you're a running quarterback, you should be really shifty and elusive in the pocket, and that's where, again, we just haven't seen that from Trey Lance yet. It's not to say that we won't, but, we certainly have seen that from Fields. Certainly some good pocket awareness from Lance in this game, but we haven't seen that sort of dynamic Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, shake and bake, if you will, whatever you want to call it, where, you've got him dead to rights. There's two guys closing in. Somehow he gets out of it and makes a throw. We just haven't seen that yet out of Lance.
So on this podcast, we will not be making sweeping conclusions about Trey Lance versus Justin Fields. We'll leave that to the national media and and Bears fans, I guess. I don't know. But as you said, Mike, just coming out of this game, so little to really take away because of the weather, because of the disparity in penalties and how it affected game flow when the penalties were called and things like that. Just an ugly loss overall for the 49ers, and extremely tedious knowing that you're going to hear about it in the national media from the guys on First Take or from Colin Cowherd, who loves to talk about Trey Lance and his readiness. Just very frustrating as a Niners fan. And there were some interesting questions that kind of got swept under the rug or just ignored because everyone was so caught up in it. New offensive line, 3 new starters, and overall I thought amazingly the guys in the interior seemed to hold up better than the tackles. McGlinchey looked slow or injured to me, and even Trent
definitely
Williams
whiffed on a few plays for
Trent
sure.
Williams had a couple misses too, which you don't ever really expect. But I thought they played fine. I don't think they lost because they got bullied in the trenches by any stretch.
Yeah, I think fine to good maybe would be a fair way to describe it. Certainly you worry about chemistry on the offensive line when literally the entire interior is new guys, and you've got McGlinchey coming back from a very serious injury. So, Banks is starting at left guard. Banks was not able to earn his way on the field at any point last year, which I think was definitely a disappointment and a surprise. But he appears to be the guy going forward, and he honestly wasn't bad. I think Spencer Burford looked really good at times too. Passing the eye test. Again, you have to take everything with a grain of salt in a weather game like this, but certainly not as bad as it could have been with all of that uncertainty around the offensive line, and definitely potential there.
You missed Elijah Mitchell too, getting hurt in this game again. So much talk about could he stay healthy, and unfortunately, he got 6 carries and then was out of the game. Jeff Wilson had 9 and averaged 2.4 yards per carry.
Yeah, and that's so rough. Mitchell was averaging almost 7 yards per carry before he got hurt. It's just shades of Raheem Mostert carrying the ball once or twice in the first game of the season. Man, it's just brutal. I know that Shanahan likes his running back by committee, and there's this perception that Shanahan can turn anybody into a 1,000-yard rusher. So yes and no. I think it does take a specific kind of runner, as we've seen. Raheem Mostert is definitely the prototypical type of back that you're looking for in that system. But the Niners have not had a 1,000-yard rusher in a season in a very, very long time, and it's just been an absolute turntable in that running back room, whether it's because of poor draft choices or injuries or what have you. But man, it's been a struggle to have consistency at that position.
And 2 months they're talking about for recovery for Elijah Mitchell. Just brutal, just incredibly frustrating. But again, O-line seemed to do okay. Just not much else to say. Jeff Wilson's long in 9 attempts was 5 yards. Just difficult to get anything going.
He's a veteran. He's a good receiver. We're fans of Jeff Wilson here. Certainly, we love it when he goes to his dark place. But just not a great game. And again, we said this before. It's really tough sledding when you've got those field conditions and you're just trying to run up the gut when they know it's coming. There's not going to be really anybody who's having really productive runs at that point.
It would have been easier to try to get to the edge too if you had your all-pro tight end
blocking. Yeah, absolutely. You definitely miss Kittle in a game like this.
And Kittle has not missed as many games as I thought when I went back and looked at it. But when he does, you feel it. And it seems like this would have been a game where it would have really helped to have a run blocking specialist at tight end.
And that's the hard thing with Kittle, too. He's one of those guys. He's an absolute warrior. And if there's any way he can make it on the field, he gets on the field. The problem with that is sometimes we've seen this before. He's battling through an injury. He toughs it out, and then he re-injures it or makes it worse and misses extended time. Certainly with the field conditions, that was absolutely a right call. I don't know the status of his groin. Obviously, I don't think many people do exactly know that status, but that's not the kind of game where you want to mess around and have a tear or some kind of injury that's going to keep him out for really significant time.
And I don't want to say the Niners took this game for granted, but you don't come into this it's not the Chiefs, it's not the Rams. You weren't expecting for George Kittle to make or break the outcome. You come in really confident in your defense and things like that, and it just didn't work out. Speaking about the defense, Hufanga looked amazing. Shades of Cam Chancellor, just a strong safety who seemed to have more tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage than our linebackers.
Yeah, and the knock on him, like a lot of people were saying, he's just too slow. He's never going to make it. And, obviously speed is important on both sides of the ball. Shanahan's speed is really everything. That being said, when you look at his instincts, his tackling ability, he really compensates for that, was just flying all over the field, was always in the right place, making the big plays when we needed him, whether it was tackles at the second level, obviously that interception you referenced, but just a really, really great football player, a really great find for this team.
It'll be exciting to see when Jimmy Ward comes back, too. Gibson didn't play horribly, but a bit of a missed opportunity on a would-be interception that seemed to go right through his hands. So overall, difficult to really evaluate the team. I think the defensive line and the front seven looks as advertised. The Bears did not get much going, but again, you don't want to draw too many conclusions. They were playing in the same weather, too. But just a frustrating way to start your season. You've got a lot of games against playoff teams later in the year. Tough to take a loss, even though it is on the road and in weather. Tough to take a loss to start your year, but time to get healthy against Seattle next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think looking at the schedule and the calendar, a lot of fans, a lot of analysts are looking at Chicago and Seattle and saying, okay, well, the Niners are starting 2-0. And unfortunately, that has already not been the case as we drop the first game to the Bears. Seattle, wow, what a shocker that was in week one, taking it to Russ, Danger Russ. Wow, it's just stunning, right?
I think we always assumed that that Russ had some kind of devil magic or something that enabled him to win time after time in these improbable situations. Wasn't he, even the Hail Mary with the replacement refs against the Packers? Yeah, and we assumed it was Russ, but he's gone, and Seattle seems to still have that mojo, so maybe it's the fans, maybe it's the stadium, we don't know.
Yeah, and again, it's week one, guys, so, there's going to be overreactions for every single team. I think certainly there's reason to be concerned there. Losing to Seattle, who had Drew Lock or Geno Smith as their quarterback options. Obviously, that's got to be disappointing for Russ. Poor guy.
Quick question. Are you more concerned about Russell Wilson after game one or the Broncos' new and not sweaty like Tom Sula, but he should be sweating a little bit. At least, his seat's probably feeling a little bit warm after all the criticism online, their new coach.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Again, just a stunner that they were able to hold off the Broncos in that game. But Geno Smith, to his credit, looked really good. He's not gonna light up the stat sheet too often, but he was 23 of 28 for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns, and most importantly is you come out with a W at the end of that game. So I think if
First
we
place.
were, yeah, wow. So, if you were taking that game against the Seahawks for granted, maybe we pause and think about that. I think the one really nice thing is that it is a home game for Trey Lance. I think going into Seattle, into that environment where you're going to have to, again, he's just had such limited reps going into such a hostile environment where it completely alters the way that you have to snap the ball and everything. I think that would be a pretty rough way to rebound from this 19-10 loss. So hopefully he can come home, be more comfortable. Hopefully the rain won't be as much of a factor, and we'll kind of just go from there and hopefully come out with a win.
Indeed. 0-1 to start your 49ers. Cries already coming for Jimmy Garoppolo. We're not going to overreact on this podcast. We are here to throw cold water on hot takes, and we will see you next week. Be sure to like and subscribe. We are the Niners Bros.